This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
In early December, as the dust settled on the devastating barbaric massacre which Hamas perpetrated on October 7th, a Palestinian official made a seemingly unsurprising statement, for a Palestinian official, that is. He said that what took place on October 7th wasn't terror, but rather a, quote, response to Israeli terror, and called on, quote, all factions to unite in combat against Israel. Again, unsurprising for a Palestinian official. What's surprising is that these weren't the words of a Hamas official, but rather Jibril Rajoub, a prominent figure within the Palestinian Authority. This statement is a stark reminder of the deep-seated narratives upheld by some within the Palestinian Authority, by most, who govern the territories of Judea and Samaria. Some claim a second October 7th. Some within Israeli society claim a second October 7th is imminent if nothing is done to curtail the PA and the Palestinians in the so-called West Bank. All of this raises profound questions, especially when juxtaposed against the backdrop of suggestions from many, both in Israel and around the world, that the Palestinian Authority should, in fact, take over governance in Gaza post-Hamas. To dig into all of this, we turn to Itamar Marcus, the founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch, PMW. Through relentless scrutiny and documentation, PMW has exposed the often hidden undercurrents of glorification and support for violence within the PA's communication and education channels. PMW and Itamar Marcus have received multiple awards, including Marcus being named one of the top 100 people positively influencing Jewish life or the state of Israel by the Allgemeiner newspaper. Marcus also represented Israel in negotiations with the Palestinians from 1998 to 1999 during the Oslo Accords. We are thrilled to be joined today on the podcast by Itamar Marcus to discuss the PA and the future of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Great. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. We're huge fans.
Huge fans.
Really impressive work. You know, we actually even used it. We did a reaction video back in the day where we reacted to kids Palestinian TV shows. It's crazy. I have to ask you right off the gate, what would you say is the most disturbing, nauseating, horrific piece of TV you witnessed as part of your work?
Do you have 3 hours? There's endless. I think the worst parts of Palestinian ideology, which they present to their people through their television, are their glorification of the murders of Israelis. And the flip side of that is convincing their own children to try to be martyrs.
This is Hamas TV or PA TV?
This is Palestinian Authority television. I would even jump over for a moment to your introduction where you talked about Hamas and what they did and that the PA supported it. From my perspective, it was the PA that inadvertently created the power of Hamas. How did this happen? Palestinian Authority has been in control of all the education in the PA since 1994. They've controlled since, even after Hamas took over in the Gaza Strip, they controlled the education there. The school books, paid for the teachers, gave the messages. Children are growing up with the same hate messages of the Palestinian Authority that Hamas has. Israel has no right to exist. The Jews are the enemies of Allah. The Jews have to be killed. You get rewarded if you kill. The same identical messages. So a kid grows up in a Palestinian school and he reaches age 16, 17, 18, and says, you know what? Palestinian Authority and Fatah are talking about this, but the ones who are doing it are Hamas. So straight from the Fatah education, they go into the hands of Hamas, and Hamas is the powerhouse that it is because they agree with everything that Fatah has been saying. Fatah agrees with everything Hamas has been saying, but Hamas does it a lot better than Fatah. That's the perception. And that's why Hamas is so powerful. PA created Hamas.
Not Bibi?
That's the big farce and the big joke that people are trying to I would say take away the blame from the Palestinians. Israelis love to blame ourselves for everything. There's been more blame in Israel of Israelis for October 7th than there has been of Hamas.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there were Israelis who failed in defending us. But let's not forget that it's Hamas who holds the hostages, Hamas who kidnapped, Hamas who murdered. That's not talked about anymore. I said, okay, that happened already. Now let's blame ourselves. It's something about our Israeli personality. We're constantly blaming ourselves for the things that other people do to us.
Yeah, it is. It's quite amazing. I mean, if you drive down the Ayalon, which is the main highway in Tel Aviv, you see these huge signs. You're the head, you're to blame.
Bibi's
and there's a big picture of Bibi. You're to blame, you're to blame. And I'm thinking about it, you know, there's these little stickers of fuck Hamas all over the place. It's like, why isn't there a huge billboard of that on the Ayalon? Or why isn't there a huge billboard of, you know...
Because you need a millionaire to...
Yeah.
There are plenty of millionaires who would fund the anti-Bibi signs. And
but I want to take us back to your question, which is... But I'd like to make it more specific, which is since October 7th, I mean, we grabbed, you know, you're the guy that runs the organization that's monitoring this stuff. We grabbed a random quote from Jibril Rajoub. What would you say are some of the top most disturbing things that the Palestinian Authority has said or promoted, written in texts, whatever, since October 7th that kind of signifies, hey, these guys are not... Okay. You know, the moderates.
Okay, so on official PA TV, a Fatah leader of, can't remember which city, went on TV and said, on October 7th, we woke up to a morning of joy, a morning of pride, a morning of victory. That's how the Palestinian population... And then we heard this over and over and over again. Jibril Rajoub, who you just mentioned, who's the Fatah secretary, who may be the next leader of the Palestinian Authority, Jibril Rajoub said it was... that what was done was heroic. It was an epic moment for Palestinians. The most disturbing poll that came about, or the most disturbing poll question after October 7th, Palestinians were asked in the middle of November by a respected polling organization, all these events, the ongoing events, does it make you feel proud to be a Palestinian? And 98% said yes. And in fact, it was 94% that said extremely proud. So you're talking about an entire population that has been indoctrinated to believe that the torture, the murder, the rape, the disgusting atrocities that were done makes them proud. I mean, this is the most shocking thing of all. 71 or 2% at the time said they were happy about what Hamas did. And I think the gap was, by that point in mid-November, Israel already had gone into Gaza. There were many casualties, so some of them weren't happy about it anymore. But they were still proud about what happened. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. This happens because of the years of indoctrination that PMW has been warning about, teaching kids, teaching adults, teaching everyone that the killing of Jews is Allah's desire, and this religious component is all too ignored. It's not primarily a nationalistic war. Palestinians, first of all, are much more Muslim in identity than they are Palestinians. Mm-hmm. Muslims goes back for years. So when you tell them this is a religious war for Allah, and killing Jews is what Allah wants, and the Jews are the enemies of all of humanity, and everybody been hating them throughout all of history, and that's why there was anti-Semitism, because the Jews brought it on themselves, and people had to defend themselves from the Jews. When you tell them that for years, of course they're going to be proud. I almost don't even blame them for being proud. They believed that Hamas was not only doing a service to Palestinians, they were doing a service to all humanity by ridding the world of Jews.
I have a problem with there's a word you said that triggered me. Indoctrinated, right? Because, you know, in Israel we talk now a lot about the conception, which is the notion that some prejudices, I guess, or I don't know how you would define it, but like mindsets that all our entire security apparatus was caught under, and that prevented them from seeing our enemy for what they really are, right? And it feels to me a bit, after hearing your fascinating explanation, that you maybe also are in a conception, because when you say indoctrinated, you are taking a lot of the responsibility off the culture, right? The education. Even without the Palestinian TV, you have
the familial unit, the individual.
Yeah, all of that, and as if to assume that if the Palestinian TV was different, they would be different, and also like the Palestinian TV is a mirror of the people, not vice versa. Don't you think?
First of all, the problem is not Palestinian TV, as you say. Palestinian TV for us at Palestinian Media Watch is a window to the world of the Palestinian Authority. We're seeing official messages. We're seeing leadership. If you look at our website, most of the material we quote are leaders who appear or official messages coming through school and education and school books. So it's not a problem of television. It's a problem of what do Palestinians believe? What do their leadership and what are they teaching them? Now, the Palestinian population has gone through indoctrination since 1994. And I want to show you by just pointing out some polls that are probably going to shock you. From 1996, make you realize how successful this indoctrination has been. Now, 1996 was when Palestinian Media Watch was founded, and there was a poll done by Khalil Shkaki, who's the most important Palestinian pollster. And he asked Palestinians, now let's get this, this is about after 30 years of Israeli rule of Gaza and Judea and Samaria. He asked Palestinians to rate 4 places in the world in democracy and human rights. So 50% of the Palestinians gave the PA a positive rating, 55% gave France a positive rating. 65% gave the United States a positive rating. And then there's Israel. What did Palestinians think about Israel after 30 years of so-called cruel occupation?
60% favorable?
78% of Palestinians give Israel a positive rating in democracy and human rights after 30 years of Israeli administration. The best
in what, 97?
In 96.
96.
Now, Shkaki did this poll 4 years in a row, and in every one of these polls, 4 years in a row, Israel came out the best in the world in democracy and human rights. So it's not a fluke. It came out better than the States, much better than the PA. Every year it was a little bit lower, but every year everyone was lower, and that was so significant. The longer the PA was in existence, so if in the first year 50% thought the PA was positive in democracy and human rights, after 4 years it was 22% who thought they were positive. And Israel had gone down to 65%, but was still the best in the world. What's going on here? When the Palestinian population had direct contact with Israel, even though they didn't have voting rights, and even though Israel was a military rule, they recognized Israel the best in the world in democracy and human rights, because we opened up all the universities that they had. I think it was 11 universities. Life expectancy under Israel went up from 48 to 72. When Israel got Judea and Samaria, I think it was something like 25 or 30% of the homes had water, gas, and electricity, and Israel got that up to close to 70%. Everything was better, and they appreciated Israel as a good neighbor. They really did. I always say the Oslo Accords were terrible. I mean, everybody recognizes this today, but I say that had we signed the Oslo Accords with the local population, and not with the PLO terror organization, we probably could have had peaceful coexistence from them till now, because the Palestinian population did not hate Israel at that time. They didn't hate Israel.
So how do you explain the first Intifada? Was that mostly like PLO operatives and agents or whatever, or was that a grassroots movement? Was it significantly less violent than the second Intifada? And then you're saying, okay, it's not like how
and you had a ton of terror
context,
attacks in 95, 96,
yeah.
97.
That's right. It's completely different than what happened later on. It was, again, driven by PLO operatives. There were certain numbers of people that came from the regular population, but the population didn't hate Israelis because there was no reason to. And then comes the Palestinian. I say no reason because Israel had been good to them. Israel had been better to them than Jordan, better to them than Egypt. They had many, many more rights. In other words, these people remembered what a dictatorship was under Jordan and under Egypt. And Israel all of a sudden gave them rights. They couldn't vote, but they were treated as human beings. I'll never forget, I was once being interviewed with, let me just tell you this, I was interviewed with Khaled Abu Toameh. I don't know if you know him. He used to be the editor of Al-Fajr during this period prior to the Oslo Accords. Al-Fajr was the PLO newspaper, and he was their editor. He was actually an Israeli Arab. And he then, after a number of years, after the Oslo Accords, he wouldn't work for the PLO anymore because they wouldn't give him any. They were just horrible, and he recognized that, and he started writing for Israeli papers. So we were interviewed together once on a radio program, and he was asked. He was talking about freedom of expression and freedom of the press, and he was asked, "Where did you learn about freedom of the press? You were under the." He said, "I learned about freedom of the press from the Israeli censor." He said, "They let me write anything I want. I could criticize Israel as much as I wanted. I could criticize everything I wanted about Israeli policy. I couldn't promote terror." And that's when I understood the freedom of the press, from the Israeli censor. So this was Khaled Abu Toameh, and today he's an avid supporter of Israel. We've spoken many times at conferences together because he recognized that what the PLO was and what it is now. That Palestinian population in 1996 that thought Israel was the best in the world in democracy and human rights, today 98% of them were thrilled about the massacre. How did that happen? That was the indoctrination. The indoctrination was not just TV. It was in the school books. It was the TV programs. It was the summer camps. It was the afternoon school. It was everything. The PA has controlled everything in their lives. And every aspect of their life is telling them Jews are evil, Israelis are evil, they have no right to exist, the state has no right to exist. And these two components are there all the time, by the way. There's Israel and there's the Jews. Israel, the state, has no right to exist, and because of nationalistic reasons, and Israel and Jews have no right to exist because primarily of Islamic reasons.
My issue with it is that, like, this isn't North Korea, that it's like an hermetic, airtight, they don't have access to any other information. Like, these are people who you say at one point held an opinion that Israel is so the Palestinian Authority, in order to brainwash them, so to speak, out of their accurate perception of reality that Israel is a freedom-loving democracy and and they're better under Israel than any other regime, like, must be so clever and effective. Like, you get what I'm saying? To get that significant chunk of Palestinians to all of a sudden believe that, it's great to massacre Israel.
It wasn't all of a sudden. It was years and years. It was the kids growing up. We saw the kids' programs on TV. We reported on the kids' programs on TV already in 1997, 1998. And the kids were busy singing there about the glory of dying as a martyr. They were singing there about Jaffa, Haifa, and Akko. They weren't singing about Ramallah and Jenin.
What I'm wondering is, because it seems, I think the argument is, okay, there's a Palestinian Authority. The question is, like, is it bottom up or top down? And you're saying there's a Palestinian Authority which is indoctrinated the people. And what I think we're wondering is it not something deep within Palestinian culture that worships death, that's a blood cult, that, maybe they responded to that poll saying, yeah, the Israelis love democracy, but that's not what we care about. We care about murdering the people Jews who are infidels.
In polls that we saw throughout the years that broke, I would say, in the early years of the PA, in the first 10 years, 15 years of the PA, whenever the polls were broken down by age category, it was always the older ones who recognized Israel's right to exist, who weren't hateful of Jews, and it was always the younger ones who hated Israel, who denied Israel's right to exist, who were more Muslim, more Islamic. We saw the impact on the youth, and as those youth, everybody who was, let's say, 15 and younger, when the PA was established, 15 years later, 20 years later, it's like the whole young population who's ruling the country, who's ruling the streets, they're all indoctrinated.
There's causality and there's correlation, right? And who's to say it's not because they just didn't experience the might of our fist like the older generation did, for example? There could be many reasons why this change happened?
First of all, there was very little might of our fist during all those years before the Oslo Accords. There was the might of 1967, and that was it. And then from then on, Palestinians got used to living with us, and the borders were open. They worked in Israel. They spoke Hebrew. They knew Israelis, and I think this was the key. They knew Israelis face to face. The workers all spoke Hebrew. In those days, because there was no terror or minor terror, they were sleeping within Israel, hundreds of thousands. And they respected, and they saw that they were getting rights, and they were protected by Histadrut labor union laws. They got travel expenses, they got vacation days. These things didn't exist in the PA. They appreciated what happened under Israel. Under the PA, all of this disappeared, and the PA blamed everything on Israel, on the young people, because we absolutely saw the input and the output. We see the input on the kids growing up with this message of, I want to be a martyr, I want to be a martyr. And today what's happening is, in the last year, we've had dozens and dozens of cases of teenagers going on terror attacks where they didn't as much want to kill Israelis as much as they wanted to die as martyrs. And we know this because they left farewell letters. In 2007, we had done already a series of reports on Palestinian school books, the first one in 1998. And then in 2007, we did another report because the PA had changed the grade 12. And we did this report, and I contacted Hillary Clinton, who I'd been in touch with, and I said, would you release this report with me in the Senate? She was then a senator. And she went over the report, studied it. Her people studied it for a while, and they said, okay, yes, we'll do it. We had a press conference together in the Senate, and her words were, when I went through this material together with the TV material, she said, the Palestinians are and she used the word, by the way, indoctrination. She said, this isn't an education. This is an indoctrination. The Palestinians are profoundly poisoning the minds of their children.
But if I remember my point. If let's go back to 97, for example. Okay, let's say these broadcasts are just starting. Now, if I had...
Broadcasts, not just school, summer camps, afternoon activities, everything.
Great. Now, if I'm a parent, right, with values, with certain values, certain worldview, when I see this, if I saw it in my school, I would storm this, like I would organize a rebellion, and if in my school they start to teach like Nazi propaganda, I'll rebel, and I'll do whatever it takes for that not to happen, including pull out my, like, you know what I mean? The ground has to be set for that move to flourish.
Okay, let me just, you mentioned Nazis. Let me just point something out, just in terms of time that's needed to poison a generation. Nazis came to power 1933. Hitler Youth played a major role, we know, in the Nazi forces, Nazi army. He retrained the whole young population. From 1993 till the end of World War II, it was only 12 years. Palestinian Authority has been around since 1996, almost 30 years. They're having 2.5 times the amount of time that the Nazis have. No one is denying the success of the Nazis in poisoning a population.
I deny it.
1 second.
I deny it.
The Jews in Nazi Germany, before Nazi Germany, Jews were in the universities. They were doctors. They were engineers. They were the mayors of Berlin. The Jews were everywhere. And then you get the Nazis in power. They start poisoning. And before you know it, the Nazi population is burning the Jews. The Palestinian authorities had 30 years, I am not surprised, 30 years of brainwashing, and we see all those brainwashing messages. I am not surprised that 98% support murder, rape.
I want to clarify, this is a clarifying question, so I want to understand your stance like one level deeper. So do you believe that without the Palestinian Authority there is a opportunity, a hope to live side by side with a significant Palestinian population, upwards of 3 million Palestinians? We can live side by side if they are, re-educated or whatever the
indoctrinated.
Whatever the process is. There is a world in which we can live side by side with significant Palestinian population.
Okay, take two things. One, we work with some Palestinians. There's a Palestinian who's met with me a number of times when members of different parliaments have visited Israel. I've invited him, and we meet together in a place where he can get to and where I can get to. He actually lives in a refugee camp. And then I make my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation. I show the slides, I show the education material, I show the videos, I show what Abbas really thinks. It's very convincing because it's just letting the Palestinians say. And then he goes and he speaks, and he says, I was brought up on all of those same things. I hated every Israeli. I was afraid of every Jew. I was sure they wanted to kill me. Then he describes how he met some Israelis, and first he was skeptical. He was sure they were trying to trick him. And then finally he had his, let's call it his wow moment, when he realized that his whole life had been a lie, and that the Israelis who he was meeting actually care about him more than the Palestinian Authority. And then, since then, he has been very interested in real peace and living beside Israel. Now, one of the MPs, a Dutch MP, said to him, how many Palestinians have opinions like you do? He says, I don't know. He says, well, don't you ask people? He says, no, I'm afraid to tell people my opinions because I'll end my life in a Palestinian Authority prison, being tortured to death, if I let anyone know what I feel about the PA and that I actually think Israelis care about Palestinians. And the MPs were shocked by this. The MPs were shocked. Not all of them were supporters of Israel before that evening. I think by the end of the evening, everybody was. Because they heard it from me. They saw the schooling. They saw the education. They saw the media. They saw the messages. And all of a sudden, he's putting his stamp of approval and said, yes, I was poisoned like that. So when they said to him, how many are there like you? And the answer is there are very few. And the polls of the support for the October 7th shows that there are very few. So Israel can't live today beside any population of Palestinians. And I'll tell you another reason why what happened to the Palestinians is worse than what happened to the Nazi population. Nazi propaganda and brainwashing and indoctrination was primarily nationalistic. The Jews are either too communist or too capitalist. They're our misfortune. They're responsible for all the world's woes. It was all on nationalistic level. It was all Nazi party opinions. When the Nazi party fell and all that is gone, it was not that much of a challenge to re-educate once you're controlling the education, as it happened. And that's what happened. They started controlling the education. With the Palestinians, they have attributed all of these ideologies to God. This is what Allah says. This is not what we see. Allah. And then they quote from the Quran. They quote from the Hadith. The hour of resurrection won't come until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. Every time you kill a Jew, you're bringing the world closer to redemption. It's for all humanity. Do you know that 2 weeks after October 7th, the Palestinian Authority Ministry of Religion, on the Thursday, when it always announces what the talking points are for the Friday sermons, the talking point they said for the Friday sermons was that hadith that I just mentioned. They wanted all the mosques in the PA 2 weeks after October 7th to teach all the people the hour of resurrection won't come until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, which will say, Muslim, servant of Allah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Come and kill him. Now what just happened 2 weeks before? Jews at the festival, at the party, were hiding behind rocks and trees, and they were massacred there. And the PA is telling its people, hey, what happened then wasn't a nationalistic thing. This is Allah's bringing the world closer to redemption. That's what's going on. That's what they wanted to teach all their people. Now, there was a poll a number of years ago, after we had released one of the many times that the PA has cited this religious message to its people, that Allah, the end of time is with the extermination of all Jews. They asked Palestinians how many believe this. And it was like 70% of Palestinians believe that this is the future, that they have this, Muslims have a destiny to bring about the extermination of Jews for the benefit of all of humanity. Now, once they believe that, you can't start living next to them, because then any agreement is temporary. Any agreement, it's always just waiting for the opportunity. You've got God.
You're allowed to lie.
You're allowed to lie.
Also in polls, by the way.
Also in polls, but yes, true. You can. You're allowed to lie. We've heard this from Palestinian leaders as well. They've said this, so we're allowed to lie to Israelis. But the point is this, that...
It's called takbir, I think. Not takbir...
Taqiyya.
Taqiyya.
The key here is this. Unless there's a change in their religious beliefs, there's no way we can live long-term next to them. And by the way, you just have to look around the Muslim world. Who were Israel's best allies in the Muslim world over the years? Iran, under the Shah. All of a sudden, you get a religious leader in there, boom, 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 and he starts quoting the more literal meaning of a lot of the Islam, and all of a sudden, Iran is a threat not just to Israel, but to all of humanity. Who else was a close ally? I mean, we used to sell weapons to Iran. Who else was a very close ally? Turkey. And who is one of the leaders now of the hate against Israel in the world? It's Turkey.
But what was the Shah? The Shah was a dictator who didn't represent the will of the people, as opposed to the Ayatollah. So what you're saying is, right, that we need to put secular dictators who have nothing to, who don't enjoy the support of the base of the people, right? Don't enjoy the consensus, in order to have fake peace with those fake countries that are not even represented, but representing the people.
No, I would say it this way: the only way we can have peace with the Palestinians is if we get the Palestinian religious leaders to tell them that they've been lied to by their political leaders and their religious leaders of the PA, and that Islam actually recognizes Israel's right to exist.
But it would be a lie.
No, it wouldn't be a lie. Because first of all, there are many, many places in the Quran that talks about the land of Israel for the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. You're
talking about a reform of Islam.
I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about going back to the original interpretation, especially of one particular verse in Islam. And I'll just let me just tell you what this is, because you're talking about. I'm saying that this is the key to peace. So that's why I want to give it. This is the key to peace. There is a verse in the Quran which says that at the end of time, the children of Israel will return to their land in one gathering. Okay? Now, what is the Palestinian
Authority? And we shall murder them. No, I'm kidding.
Well, no! Excuse me. That's what the PA has done. And it's not the PA. 100 years ago, the Muslim Brotherhood, in an attempt to delegitimize Zionism, that's what they added to that. They absolutely added that. And we have heard sermons on TV where they said, we must kill the Jews, as it says in the Holy Book. I will bring the Jews back in one gathering so you can kill them. And it is read literally without even a pause. And a Palestinian who doesn't know the Quran by heart will say, that's why Israel exists. Because it's impossible to kill all the Jews in the world if they're spread out everywhere. So therefore, Allah brought them back so it's easy to kill them. That is Palestinian Authority ideology. Now, I asked my staff, first of all, there are Muslim leaders around the world, like Sheikh Abdullah Palacci of Italy, who first explained this to me. We were speaking together at a conference in Paris, and he was quoting all the sources in Islam that demand Islam recognize Israel's right to exist and say that the land belongs to the children of Israel. And I had lunch with him. After we both spoke, he heard me, I heard him. And I said, what do you do with all these sources, the PA? And I started quoting him the PA sources. He says they distort them all. And in this source in particular, he says they distort. I went back to the office, and I had my office, and we have Islamic scholars. I said, I want you to go through all the Islamic commentary from the time of the Quran until 100 years ago. And I want to see if anyone reinterprets this verse to mean that the Jews are coming back to Israel to be killed. And no one. There was not one commentary who said that. So from the beginning of Islam till 100 years ago, Islam was a Zionist source. Islam believed. Now, I want to have a Palestinian religious leader come up and tell the Palestinians, guess what? The existence of Israel proves the prophecy of the Quran. It proves the Quran is a prophetic book. It proves Muhammad's prophecy. Because it says that the Jews are going to come back in one gathering. And that's what we see in front of our eyes. We must support Israel because this proves the Quran. That's what Sheikh Abdullah Palacci does. And that's what we have to convince the Palestinians, that they've been duped by the Palestinians adding on so we can kill them, which wasn't there in the original. Without this, there's no chance of peace. As long as Palestinians think that Israel exists so that they can kill us more easily, there's no chance. No matter what they may sign, no matter what they may do, no matter how many President Biden's, Obama's, or Blinken's convince them to sign something, just to be able to get a deal, it's not going to happen. They must change the way they see the religious world.
Or we all convert to Islam. I think it's a more probable... that will happen before... sorry to be the...
I'm not
pessimistic.
No, I didn't say this can happen or it will happen. I'm saying it's the only way that we'll have a population stop believing they have to kill us.
So I want to ask about the current situation and something we referred to in the opening. Do you believe that another October 7th is possible with the current population living in Judea and Samaria, so-called West Bank, under the leadership of the PA?
There's no doubt that it could have happened, and had there been coordination between the population in Gaza and the population in Judea and Samaria, it could have happened on the same day, because you certainly have enough people and you have vast amounts of weapons that are there. Could have happened, and none of the towns and even the borders into Israel, quote unquote Israel proper, pre-67 Israel, they're not that well protected. They could knock those same little fences over the same way they did. It could have happened. As soon as it happened, Israel has gone in. We've arrested, I think, 1,000 people by now. We have destroyed so many terror cells. We have killed dozens and dozens of terrorists. And what's significant here, and this is part of, you talked about the conception, that Israel had the conception. We didn't just discover who these terrorists were after October 7th. We've known all along, and yet we didn't go and catch them and kill them beforehand. And that's the tragedy here, is that Israel is, okay, the worst ones. When we see a new organization, we went in, we did minor things. We let them grow, we let them develop their own terror. We didn't want to weaken Mahmoud Abbas too much by going in regularly and having his people hate him for Israel going into the Palestinian cities and killing the terrorists. But as soon as they realized the threat, they went and did what they should have done and could have done years ago.
1,000. How many terrorists do the PA? How many, like Hamas, the estimates were 40,000. How many does the PA have?
Okay, so it's very interesting numbers, because what you have, first of all, is you have a Palestinian police, the Palestinian Security Services. Now, we recently published a report which we called Terrorists in Uniform, 14 pages of a few hundred examples of Palestinian Authority police security services. These are funded by the West, given weapons with Israel's permission. Training abroad, snipers who were trained in Jordan.
Paratroopers.
That's right. And who are all terrorists. In fact, one of them, who we reported on, Shabak, the Israel Secret Service, actually announced after he was caught that he was in the main organizer of terror in all of Judea and Samaria. And he was an officer in the Palestinian Authority Security Services. Now,
you have hundreds of examples, and you said there are 14,000?
I said
15,000?
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say
in the police.
No,
in the police force. So
the police force. Oh, the police force is many thousands more than, I can't remember the exact numbers. Now, what's so interesting, it's not just how did we find out all of these people were terrorists? It's because when they became terrorists and they died as terrorists, the Palestinian Authority literally celebrated the fact that their security services were also fighting against Israel. One of the terrorists who was killed, they made this big thing on TV about him, and they said security services by day and a fedayun by night, a self-sacrificing fighter by night. That's what
dark nights.
Yeah. They had no problem with the fact that he was playing this double role. Then there were a group of 24 of them who were all killed in terror attacks. So they made a video to celebrate them. And in each one of them, they had a picture of the terrorist in uniform. And they had some background of, all sorts of military pictures in the background. But they had his picture in large. And then on the right side of the screen, they had the logo of the branch of the PA Security Services that he was a member of. And on the left side, they had the logo of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, which is a terrorist organization designated by the Europeans, by the Americans. And they had no problem publicizing this on TV, that they were both members of the thing. So you've got many thousands of Palestinian Authority security services. They are all dedicated to destroying Israel, the same way these terrorists were. They also, by the way, the heads of the security services do work with Israel. They notify Israel whenever they know about Hamas terrorists. Why? Because the PA is afraid of Hamas much more than they're afraid of Israel. Hamas would do in Judea and Samaria what they did in Gaza. The PA is afraid of Hamas. Everyone thinks and makes this terrible mistake thinking that the security services is something, the security cooperation that the PA has with Israel, they do for Israel's benefit. They don't. They do it for their own benefit. They tell us when Hamas is organizing, they're too weak to go in and stop them or capture them or arrest them. They tell Israel, Israel goes in, they tell their soldiers to get away. Israel's going to do the work for us. Israel goes in, and they even condemn Israel, of course, afterwards, publicly. But they're the ones who tell us about it because it's for their own benefit.
Sounds like we're getting handled.
Can you name one ideological difference between Hamas and the PA?
The ideological differences have to do with internal religious beliefs and how strict.
But it's not Sunni and Shia, like it's
no.
significant.
No. We're talking about probably about the role of women and should women drive cars or not, things like that.
But is there something? I mean, there must be something that we have to say something about the fact that the PA is cooperating to some extent with the Israeli apparatus, whereas Hamas was not. Is that not a difference in your opinion? Meaning, we, like you mentioned, we have just the fact that we're communicating with the Palestinian security forces.
Okay,
I think we communicated with Hamas also.
One of the times when negotiations was restarted under Mahmoud Abbas, the Friday after the negotiations started, he sent Mahmoud al-Habash, who's his advisor on Islam, to give the sermon on Palestinian TV. At that time, he was also the minister of religion. He goes on Palestinian TV and he says, a lot of people are complaining that we're negotiating with Israel again. We're having formal, peace talks, when they had peace talks again. And he said, let me remind you of what happened with Muhammad. Muhammad wanted to conquer Mecca. He came to the outskirts of Mecca. He couldn't conquer Mecca. So he signed a treaty with the Quraysh tribe, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, at the town of Hudaybiyah. It was a 10-year treaty with Hudaybiyah. And then 2 years later, when he was able, he went in and he conquered Hudaybiyah. He conquered Mecca. And then he said, this is the model. This is our strategy. He said it openly on TV. The PA has adopted, in 1988, there was this big announcement of the stages plan. Get what you can and keep chopping Israel up in small pieces. Israel will get smaller and smaller and smaller and then won't be able to survive. That was what was announced many times. We've heard this mentioned. Yasser Arafat mentioned it, by the way, just a couple of weeks after signing the Oslo Accords. He mentioned this at a speech in Johannesburg to Muslims in a mosque. And this is Mahmoud Abbas' advisor just saying this a number of years ago. And I'll give you another example. Abbas Zaki, who is very close, he's a member of the Fatah Central Committee, he's close to Abbas, he represents him sometimes as a speaker. He went on TV, this is Al Jazeera, and he said, of course we want greater Palestine, meaning all of Israel. He said, but we have a political program. We're going to get what we can. And then he said the following, and the political program is to ask for the 67 borders. Why? Everybody knows Israel can't survive those borders. So we're trying to get to those borders, and then we'll continue. And then he says at the end, you can say this to yourself, you can't say this out loud. That's PA ideology. Now, of course,
Hamas saying it out loud.
He said it, and this is, and that's probably the big difference between Hamas and the PA. Hamas, because they're more fundamentally an Islamic movement. Hamas doesn't even have the name Palestinian in their title. Hamas is an acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement. Their goal is Islam. Palestinian Authority, PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, their goal is Palestine. They're primarily nationalistic with all of Islam ruling them. And the other ones are an Islamic movement, but they have a nationalistic component because the first part is there. But so that's the fundamental difference. Now, because they're an Islamic movement, they can't even openly say, they won't even lie and say we recognize Israel's right to exist. They won't do that. Whereas the PA is saying, okay, we're allowed to lie for that purpose.
So I just want to go back. If you had to ballpark the number of security, the number of people
Potential-
that are armed that would rise up, that are organized, you know,
I think it's 20, 30,000.
20, 30,000
Yeah.
in Judea and Samaria.
Yeah.
So why, again, we maybe arrested and killed 1,000, but why wouldn't 19 to 29,000 be
Because-
able to commit something similar? I was just visiting my parents in Sharei Tikva, right on the Green Line, and I passed by the fence. I didn't see one army. I'm sure they have, you know, very
Good.
high-tech sensors on the fence, but we saw how good that
Yeah.
works.
The 1,000 people that we went for are the ones who were the organizers, the ones who were planning, the ones who were leading the organizations, the ones who could get a following after them. We didn't just choose 1,000. By the way, my organization is working very closely with the Army since October 7th. We've worked before October 7th. I speak to members of usually more than 20 different parliaments a year, members of governments, constantly giving them information about what's going on in the PA, having fantastic results. People say, "Well, look at Israel's position." I say, "You can imagine where we would be without what we've shown them about the PA." So that's the. But since October 7th, we were turned to by Army, intelligence, other forces of intelligence, Shabak, and we've been supplying a lot of information about what's going on. Special WhatsApp group where we send everything we find. We send to them direct phone calls. Created a program that helps, and we know what's going on. There's incredible observing and watching of all the different Palestinian groups that we're actually a part of this. And I don't want to go into any more details on that, but we know what's going on.
Which leads to the question: could you, in retrospect, identify trends in the weeks and months before October 7th that maybe would be, I don't know, an alert of some sort to us?
Absolutely. I mean, we've already alerted about a number, and stopped literally in a number of terror attacks that were happening, and much more than that. Again, I don't want to go into it, but
what was happening in Palestinian TV in the weeks and months before? Was there anything unusual?
The important things won't be on Palestinian TV. I mean, the important things are the trends, the leadership's messages, but the important things that we're talking about happening on the social media,
Which you also monitor.
which we also monitor.
And what did you recognize, also, like in general terms?
The truth is that some of my people after October 7th said we actually could have put it all together. There have been many times that we've seen these things. There was a video that Hamas publicized just a few months before, in August. That was unbelievable. That literally everything that happened, they showed in the video. Everything that happened, they enacted it, they practiced it, they showed it happening, and they put it right there on social.
They put the date, the time.
Everything but the date and time.
They tagged us. They tagged everyone.
So that's part of the problem, and I think that was part of the failing of intelligence. I'll tell you why the intelligence failed. There's an incredible line. Of course, the Nuremberg trials were the trial of the Nazi war criminals after World War II. The Chief Justice of the Nuremberg trials was, his name was Jackson. He was an American lawyer, American judge. And he writes this long introduction to the decisions at the Nuremberg trials. It's worth reading. It's just fascinating. He goes through the whole history of what Hitler did and how he tricked everyone with lies and promises and agreements, and he shows, over and over and over again, at the same time as he was announcing that he was going to destroy the Jews and saying it over and over again. And then he has this incredible line. He says, Hitler told his plans so openly that everyone refused to believe him.
Hide in plain sight.
Exactly. That's right. Because it was so open, he can't mean it. If he really meant it, he would be whispering it. And I think that was what happened with the Israeli intelligence. It was right there. It was so open. They put these films on TV, what they're planning to do. So are people with the conception, and who didn't understand PA ideology at all, Hamas ideology. They said, oh, if they're showing it to us, they're just bragging. Because if they really were going to do it, they wouldn't be showing it to us. And that was the same mistake that the West made against Hitler, the Israeli intelligence made with Hamas on October 7th.
Amazing. I have one more question. If you were the prime minister, would you tomorrow take complete control over all Palestinian media and just either shut it down or replace it with our propaganda?
Again, I'll repeat, the problem is not Palestinian media. In fact, a few years after I started the organization, I thought of changing the name to Palestinian Society Watch. Because we're not following the media. The media for us is the window into the mindset of every single Palestinian leader. Particularly today with social media, we follow the social media, everything that Jibril Rajoub posts on his page, and everything that Abbas has from the president's office, and everything that Rudaina, his spokesman, we know what's in their mind. We know what they're thinking. So there's nothing as simple as changing the media, because they have every which way. They have the summer camps. They have children's magazines that they produce. They have educational magazines. They have everything. They control everything. They control the lives.
Would you take control? Like now in Gaza, we have the opportunity to take complete control over all of those means of education and reshape it as we see fit. Would you do that if you were in power?
Okay, absolutely. That's what has to be done, but we can't be the ones to do it because of the way they have been poison, to see Israelis as poison and Jews as poison. They won't accept that from us. But there are Western powers that could do this. And then again, I talked a lot about the Nazis, and that's what happened after World War II. It was the ally powers. They're the ones who controlled completely the education, the culture, the messages in society. And I'll remind you, that was 12 years, not 30 years. So we have 30 years of poisoning to undo. Gaza is an opportunity now. There's nothing there. We have to finish getting those pockets of Hamas out of there. Israel has to rule militarily from the outside as much as possible. And there has to be a civil administration on the inside that's not an Israeli-run civil administration, but it is foreign-dominated. Now, we know that all these foreign countries have said they're not going to do it because they're afraid at this point of saying that. But I'm hoping that once we destroy Hamas completely, and we have to just hope that the army is able to do that, even no matter how long it takes, once Hamas is gone, and then the Western powers, not Israel, the Western powers go to the Arab countries who are quote-unquote moderate and say to them, okay, we want you to run the education. We want you to run this. We want you to run civil society here. At that point, when it's still too fresh right now, but at that point, if it's 6 months, if it's a year, come to them and say, okay, you want to have, and then the Palestinian, we can build something from scratch. And then you want to hear some optimism here, some insane, ridiculous optimism.
What we've been hearing isn't optimism.
Because Gaza is going to be starting from ground zero.
Singapore.
It's going to be built up from nothing. We'll have 10 years, let's say, to re-educate, to make them realize that Israel's not the enemy, that Jews aren't the enemy, that they want to live in peace, that they can, and then that can be a model for redoing of Judea and Samaria. In other words, once that's successful and we have a peaceful Gaza that is created not by Palestinians, but by outside forces, by the way, it'll be the Palestinian mentality that existed before the Oslo Accords. The Palestinian outlook that Israel is the best in the world in democracy and humanity. That's what we have to get back to.
Wouldn't it be just
taking
easier
that one poll?
I 4 years in a row. 4 years.
No, but one question.
Yeah.
On one poll, which is Israel do you view Israel positively in democracy and freedom, right?
Yeah, democracy and human rights. Yeah.
But maybe they don't care about democracy and human rights.
At that time they did, because they were ruled by Israel, which was a democracy that gave them human rights, and they appreciated it.
But wouldn't it just be easier to push them all to Jordan? Really? Wouldn't it just be the easier solution?
Easier from what sense? I mean, they're
practical.
Okay, no, come on. There are international forces, here.
They'll say you occupy them and indoctrinate them.
What? No.
In your scenario.
In my scenario, it's going to be
occupiers.
We had a right to destroy Hamas. They were the rulers. Hamas, the same way Nazi, and I don't know why Israeli leaders don't say it every day. The same way they refer to ISIS. ISIS, ISIS never really ruled. Talk about the Nazis. The same way the Nazis were destroyed till the last one, literally, and then the outside forces ruled. That's the model. That's what Israel has to say the model is. We need a re-education, reculturization, everything new in the Palestinian Authority, the same way the Nazis, who had been poisoned by the Nazi Party, the same way the Germans, I should say, who had been poisoned by the Nazi Party, needed something from the outside to force them to see the world differently. The PA, the Palestinian population, we have to reverse to go back to the way it was in 1992, 1993.
Just for the record, I have a deep disagreement with you. It starts in Germany, my disagreement with you. I really disagree that the German population was indoctrinated. I really disagree. I think it was intrinsic in their belief.
Fertile ground.
Exactly. And you just needed someone to go and do this, right? And push them over the edge. And to me, if you give them too much credit when you say, that they're feeble enough to be swayed so easily to that direction or the other. 10 years of that, 10 years of that, 10 years of Hitler, they're Nazis, 10 years of American occupation, they love us. I think that,
something. I think the Germans,
with all due respect, I said it, right?
The Germans were closer to being tipped toward Nazism. They'd gone through a terrible, horrific period under, after World War I. There had been a lot of suffering under the agreements and terrible unemployment, and so they were closer and more willing, fine, than the Palestinians. On the other hand, the Palestinians had no reason to hate the people who had been so good to them for all those years, and it was recognized. And like I said to you, I remember the polls in the early years. It was the young people who developed the hatred, denied Israel's right to exist, and it was the older people. And in fact, it was even, I remember one of the questions, I think this was in 2003, do you want to have an Islamic state or a democratic state? It was the older ones that wanted a democratic state. It was the younger ones already who wanted the Islamic state. And under the PA education, they wanted more of an Islamic state. So this is what happened in the PA. They were indoctrinated to be poisoned. Like Hillary Clinton said, they are now, we are facing the poisoned Palestinian, let's not use the word indoctrinated. This is the poisoned Palestinian population that Hillary Clinton warned about, and now we have to detoxify them.
I think the first step to detoxification is complete and utter defeat, not of Hamas, but of the Palestinians. They need to be defeated. They need to be brought to their knees. That, like the Germans, the only reason we were able to denazify... I'm not saying how exactly, but I'm just saying we're so focused on defeating Hamas. In 1967, the Palestinians were defeated. We conquered the West Bank and Gaza. They were part of, everybody wants to go back to the 1967 because we conquered it. It was ours. And they were, in some sense, defeated, but I don't think they were even, I don't think, maybe that's why we found ourselves where we are today.
In 48,
we didn't bring them to their knees. And they came back. We're too concerned. I agree with you, and I think maybe I'm in the middle here. I think people are led, but also I feel like you're putting the individual too much to the wayside. And we talk, you said Palestinian Society Watch, but then you constantly go back to the leadership in PA. But I think we're so concerned in Israeli society, like, how do we fix our enemy? Before just asking ourselves, like, let's crush our enemy.
I agree with you completely. I don't disagree. The Palestinians are not the Palestinians of Judea and Samaria, Palestinian Authority. They will not willingly all of a sudden come and say, okay, let's make peace with Israel. Only after they are crushed, be it militarily or otherwise, and realize that they have no hope. And as long as they have hope of destroying Israel, they will hope to destroy Israel. we have to crush them so that there is no hope, and then they can also hopefully have that new religious perspective and others and
Reform.
religious
I really do think it's a reform of the Islam. I mean, it's something on the level of, you know, Protestantism. Of
No, if you call it reform, they'll never do it. If you say
Okay,
going
yeah,
back to the authentic Islam, you have a
They're
chance.
not
Maybe-
listening.
maybe if you say it out loud, they'll think you don't actually mean it.
It can come from me. It can come from me. Like I said, it can come from Israel. It has to
Right.
come from Muslims. It has to
Hush,
come-
of course.
We have to bring Abdallah Palacci over. He's got to sit here. He's got to
He
teach
won't
them.
give out the pasta in Italy so easily. He's eating carbonara and say, let's all have peace.
I think he might be drinking some wine too.
Itamar, it was fascinating. Really, I think it's an important discussion to be had, and
Absolutely,
fascinating, and
absolutely.
opinion, and thoughts and opinions that are not, unfortunately, are not being heard, especially in Hebrew. Also, of course, in English, but in Hebrew, never. Those you can't hear those perspectives at all.
Nuance too. Something that you don't often.
Thank you.
And,
Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Your organization accepts donations,
Yes, we
right?
do.
Can you give some details? How
Yes.
can people donate?
Our website is palwatch.org. Just go into our website, first of all, to get our almost daily updates with new items, which you
English
can...
subtitles, everything.
Everything video, English subtitles, important things that really give you a perspective on what's happening in the PA world, what's really happening. And on the website, it has to see there how to contribute to PMW, and we have status in Israel for the tax deductions as well.
And check them out.
And by the way, and in the United States as well, and around the world.
Okay.
Check out their website. Just look up Palestinian Media Watch, and you guys also have on YouTube. There's tons of fascinating videos. So check
Highly
it out.
recommended.
Yeah,
Highly recommended.
100%.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very
Keep on
welcome.
the good
Thank you.
work. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you
Till
next
next
time.
time.